The average person is said to spend 15 minutes in the bathroom. Why not take advantage of that time and learn something new? Presenting the 15-minute podcast on weird facts, crazy details, and funny particulars that you'll be able to enjoy while you're taking on your free time. Welcome to The Shit with Sam Butler. Welcome to another episode of The Shit Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Butler. I'm real happy to be here. I'm actually back home in El Paso, Texas. I'm here just for today because then we're taking off to Seattle, Washington. With that being said, I want to thank you guys for joining me on episode 107. This is episode 107 of The Shit Podcast. I want to start out by thanking everybody for liking, subscribing, and also hitting the notifications bell on my YouTube channel. If you need to find it, it's Tu Amigo Sam. That's Tu Amigo Sam on YouTube. If you listen to us on Spotify or other platforms for podcasts, I appreciate you guys doing so. With that being said, I also have an announcement. I will be headlining Club 139 in Mexico City, Friday, August 26th at 10:30 p.m. That's right. I'm headlining the club. It's kind of a big deal. It's the premier club in Mexico City. I have some Mexico City friends joining me for that. And also my friend Adrian Monroy from El Paso, Texas. And also Freddy Correa from Las Vegas, Nevada. It'll be an international show. Thank you guys. Tickets are available at circulorojo.com / or I think it's circulorojo.com / Sam Butler. Tickets are 300 pesos. If you happen to be out there, it's like $15 American. If you have family, friends, let them know. They can buy tickets now. I appreciate you guys. I'm really, really excited and looking forward to it. Well, I have a very interesting episode for you guys this week. I've been researching different articles. I came across this one article, and I thought it was amazing. I didn't realize that it was that well known. I don't think a lot of people know about it, but I thought for sure this would make a great episode of the Shit Podcast. Now, before we get started, or as we get started, many of y'all don't know, or many of y'all may know, if you're my generation and older, then you definitely know. If you're younger than us, then it might not be something that you're familiar with, but back in the 60s, the United States, we had something called the Cuban Missile Crisis. Now, what was the Cuban Missile Crisis? Well, pretty much Cuba accepted or embraced communism as their political structure. So they embraced the Soviet Union, which we refer to as Russia, but we know that Russia was the major component of the Soviet Union. But the Soviet Union actually included a lot of different countries, but they were all under this communist blanket that was the Soviet Union. Now, that was our arch nemesis back in the 60s, 70s, 80s. Every 80s movie you could ever think of had to do with beating the Russians, defeating the Russians. Like I said, when I say Russians in this particular episode, I'm talking about the Soviet Union. But we were obsessed with their technology, what they could do. And so what happens is Cuba embraces communism. The Russians decide that Cuba is close enough to the United States. It'd make an excellent launching pad for intercontinental ballistic missiles carrying nuclear warheads. So they decided that they would set up shop in Cuba. Now, the official story from Russia was that they were setting up radio communications for the Cuban government so that the Cuban government could modernize and so on and so forth. The U.S. government had intelligence. Their intelligence came from an agency called the CIA, which is the Central Intelligence Agency. Now, that's important as well for this episode because we're going to be talking about the CIA and everything that went down with this. Now, 1968, Cuban Missile Crisis. Actually, I think the Cuban Missile Crisis was like 1963 or 62 because John F. Kennedy had to deal with it. And we know John F. Kennedy was assassinated in 62. And then in 63, Lyndon B. Johnson became president. So ever since 1962, the United States was terribly scared that the Russians were setting up shop in Cuba. It's only 90 miles south of Florida. And a lot of people will ask me from time to time, well, why is Puerto Rico part of the United States, but they're not a state? Well, Puerto Rico just happens to be on the other side of Cuba. So I think it's very convenient that the United States kind of adopted Puerto Rico as one of its territories, which allowed it to set up shop in Puerto Rico as a counter to the Cuban Missile Crisis. So that's why our Puerto Rican brothers and sisters are American when they're born. Now, that being said, that's just the foundation to this story. It's a little bit of context. It really has not much to do with the story other than the fact that that was the political climate in the United States in the 1960s. We fast forward to 1968, and intelligence finds out that there's a missing submarine, a Russian submarine somewhere in the Pacific Ocean. And they find this out kind of unwittingly because they start to realize that the Russians are on a search and rescue mission. And then all the intelligence came together and figured out that there was a missing sub. So the United States said, we have to find that sub first. And it became a race to find this missing submarine. And so how would we do this, though, without declaring war, without creating an international incident? That was the other challenge. So the CIA gathered its intelligence and they concocted a wild plan. They were going to build a barge or a boat, a huge boat that had to be bigger than the submarine, obviously. But this boat would be hollowed out on the bottom. And they would go and search. Well, the first thing they did is they went and searched for the submarine, and they found it. Now, some reports say they found it 1,500 miles away from Oahu, Hawaii. Other reports said it was much closer. I don't know what the truth is, and that's really not important for the story other than the fact that they found the submarine first. Now, they didn't want the Russians to know that they had found the submarine, so they concocted an elaborate plan to find the submarine and then rescue the submarine. The bad part is that submarine was 16,000 feet below sea level, which is like 5 kilometers. It was 5 kilometers below sea level. They had never tried to pull something out from those depths. So how were they going to do this? Their idea was to build a huge boat, hollow the bottom out of the boat, and then have a giant claw drop into the ocean and retrieve the submarine. Now, this sounds like pretty easy, and if this was a Marvel movie, it would have been done fairly easily, but that's a lot harder than it sounds. So the first thing that they did is they said, okay, we need a cover for why we have such a big boat sitting out there trying to retrieve the submarine, and it has to be credible. So what do? They go to the extravagant billionaire of the time, Howard Hughes. And if you guys have seen the Howard Hughes movie, you know that Howard Hughes was like kind of a hermit, he kind of went crazy towards the end of his life. He was a billionaire, kind of like Elon Musk today. I got my bet that Elon Musk is like the modern day Howard Hughes. And who knows, maybe he works for the CIA as well, because there's a lot of crazy stuff happening with SpaceX and all those different things. A lot of government contracts are involved, a lot of secrecy. But he's also always in pop culture and the media. I don't know. That's just me. That's my idea. I don't know that that's true, but it's kind of fishy. Anyways, Howard Hughes was the perfect cover because he had the money to bankroll something like that. He had the reputation to go do something crazy like that. And what they did is they built this huge boat, and they put the boat on the ocean, and it had the cover that it was actually mining. It was a mining operation, but it was bankrolled by Howard Hughes, so the government wouldn't be connected to it at all. Now, they were kind of worried that if they took off straight into the Pacific, people would get suspicious, so they took off from the Atlantic. Now, there's something called the Panama Canal, which is a strip of land that was removed in Central America so that ships could pass from one side of the world to the other relatively easy. The problem was that this boat was so big, it would not fit through the Panama Canal. So they sailed it out of the Atlantic, and it sails south past like Chile, and then comes right back up, and it docks in Long Beach. Now in Long Beach is where it gets all of its supplies, and it actually gets fitted with this giant claw. And if you can imagine, the claw is like that claw machine that you go to You go to the pizza place, and they got those claw machines for the kids to play with. They can win like a 30-cent stuffed animal. It ends up costing you like $20 in quarters, but the kids have a good time trying to retrieve something that's worthless. That's just me being a disgruntled parent because I spent a lot of money on that kind of stuff as my kids were little. Now my kids are grown, so I don't have to worry about that. But they outfit this boat with this giant claw. The boat goes out to the spot that they found the submarine. They drop the claw down to retrieve the submarine, and they start to pull it up. Now, a portion of the submarine seems to be missing at this point, but they're able to pull out. They start pulling out the main fuselage, the main part of this submarine, and as they're pulling it out, it actually breaks. So they break off a good chunk of it at trying to retrieve it. Now, the idea was they wanted to know what was in the submarine. They were afraid that the submarine had nuclear warheads on it. They were afraid, they wanted to know what the technology that the Russians had at the time was. And so it was very important to them to retrieve this. Now, Russia's not stupid. Russia starts to catch on. They don't suspect necessarily, but they do suspect, but they don't know. Now, they retrieve a portion of the submarine only, and what they do find is that a portion of that they retrieved actually had internal damage, where it seemed like a torpedo may have gone off inside the submarine. They had an internal fire. They retrieved the body of 6 sailors, Russian sailors, and not a lot much more. Although there is, I think Wikipedia had an article in there that talked about how the Nuclear Trade Commission or Energy World Commission had actually said that there was 2 warheads on there, and both those 2 nuclear warheads on there that had been retrieved. But the idea is that they wanted to know what was in the sub. Now, the Russians kind of suspected. They kind of get wind of this. They don't know for sure, but it's not till 1992 that the U.S. government actually admits that they retrieved the submarine or portions thereof. They didn't specify exactly how much at the time, and the Russians now were afraid that the Americans had more knowledge than we actually did. We only really got a small portion of the submarine, but they suspected the whole thing had been retrieved. But it was interesting that they did give those 6 sailors all military honors and a burial at sea. So it's one of those things that squeaking noise you hear, that's my dog Nola. She's having a good time, so I apologize. I hadn't seen her in a month, so she's having a good time, but she's deciding to squeak her toy right now while I'm doing this podcast. With that being said, we'll continue. What I was saying is the Russians thought we knew more than we didn't. Than we did. We didn't let them know we didn't know as much as we did, but we did let them know that they retrieved the bodies of 6 sailors. And they gave the 6 sailors a burial at sea with military honors. And they actually recorded this. And they gave the Russian government a video of that funeral in 1992. And so this whole operation cost something like $300 million, and it didn't happen until like 1976. So in 1974 is when they found the actual submarine. It took a couple of years to get to the point to where they could retrieve it. I thought this was a great article to talk about, a very interesting Cold War. The CIA is involved, cover stories with extravagant billionaires. They bankrolled the whole thing, and it's one of the most expensive operations in U.S. history. Not compared to today's dollars, obviously, but for that kind of an investment at that time in history would be like an equivalent of a few $1 billion today to retrieve the submarine. The CIA looks at it as a huge success. Remember that a lot of the intelligence agencies use this stuff as propaganda or I believe the CIA uses it kind of as an example of a successful mission, and a lot of agencies, a lot of the covert operations and so on and so forth are more about information. And so the information that got out was that we knew more than we did, which was exactly what we wanted. So with that being said, we wrap up this episode of the Shit Podcast. I want to thank you guys once again for joining me. I want to thank you guys for following my channel. Like and subscribe. You can follow me on social media as well. Tu Amigo Sam. That's Tu Amigo Sam. My personal page has Tu Amigo as one word, and that's because they won't let me just put Tu Amigo Sam on my personal. But with that, thank you guys. We'll catch you on the next episode. I hope to be back in the studio soon. But for now, I'm on the road and I'm taking advantage of this format to get these episodes to you guys every single week. Thank you guys. Thank you for the support. I want to shout out to Los Cagadienses, the official Facebook page. You could join, share memes, leave your comments. I read the comments. Thank you guys once more. That's the end of this podcast. Goodbye.